So I'd like to begin by first acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And also Celeste and Sean are coming to us from the Katzie nations. So we hear this often before the start of many events. I'd like to take a moment for us to really think about what unceded means to us. So I'll start by introducing Celeste. Most of you know Celeste. She's an amazing, multi-talented woman that I have the honor to know. My sister the other day sent me a link to interview that she came across with Celeste, and she sent it to me, and she was just in awe of her, and rightly so. So Celeste Nazeli Snowber is a poet, dancer, poet, writer, and award-winning educator. Her multidisciplinary works has pioneered and instituted the importance of embodied forms of inquiry, the presence of the body within arts-based research, and its implications for writing, being, creating, teaching, and living. The foundation of her research lies in the integration between body and mind, physicality and spirituality, with emphasis on connecting the personal and universal. The essence of her performative work centers around site-specific performance and complete one-woman shows that integrate comedy, contemporary dance, and improvisation, and how one lives a juicy life amidst complexities and wonder. And juicy is very, very Celeste. As a professor in the Faculty of Education at the Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada, obviously, Celeste is a sought-after mentor and has recently expanded her reach to write, speak, and perform to wider audiences who long for the connections between authentic living, discovering voice, and exploring artistic expression in the midst of difficult times. Celeste's publications include books, collections of poetry, as well as chapters and articles in scholarly books and journals. She has performed and spoken internationally from concert venues, galleries, museums, conferences, and in various outdoor spaces. And this current book that Celeste is launching is her 7th book and her 3rd book of poetry. So an amazing feat. And thank you, Celeste, for allowing me to interview you. And it's definitely an honor to do so.
It's a delight to have you.
So I'd like to ask for everyone to please mute yourselves if you have not done so already. And next, I'd like to thank and introduce Dorothy Lander and John Graham Paul, who are Harp Publishing, the People's Press, and they have published Celeste's book, and we are thankful to them that they have brought this book to us. They are a multimedia publisher focused on the healing arts and the arts for health equity. It is aimed at a popular readership of caregivers and care receivers in both electronic and print media. The acronym HARP stands for Healing Arts, Reconciling People. Their name represents both art and cooperation amongst all communities for the greater personal and collective health. So thank you, Dorothy and John. I'd like to invite you to say a few words. I'm just going to put you on the spotlight here, and I'm not sure where Dorothy is. Oh, there we go. I just found you, Dorothy.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Tamar. And Dorothy's actually going to say a word specifically about our relationship, our wonderful relationship with Celeste. I'm not muted, am I? No, you can hear me? Okay. So I just want to thank you for giving us a chance to, well, just to say we're so glad about our association with Celeste. Dorothy and I have been long interested in the relationship between the arts and our health, our personal and our collective whole health, body, mind, and spirit. So this, as I will say no more, it's clear to everybody that Celeste represents the arts in action, education, and very much healing. So I think that's all I'll say. And Dorothy, do you want to speak a little bit more perhaps about our relationship with Celeste?
Well, I thought folks might like to know how does a poet find a publisher and how it all began. So I went back to find out when Celeste first contacted us to wonder if the Marrow of Longing would be appropriate for HARP, the People's Press. So I pulled out the email from July 28th, 2020, 3:39 p.m. And Celeste wrote me and said, well, dear Dorothy, first, I hope this finds you well in these times of COVID. My colleague and dear friend, Barbara Bickle, suggested I write you as I'm in the process of finding a publisher for my book of poetry, The Marrow of Longing, which is a poetic memoir that explores poetry as a way of excavating trauma, beauty, and how fragments hold the world. And this collection of poems traverses the journey of being raised by an artistic mother who survived the Armenian genocide. And she goes on, I won't read the whole thing, but it's pretty much the way she said it was as it turned out. And of course, she's justifying how the Marrow of Longing fits with HARP, and of course it does. In some ways, this book falls into the cracks, and yet at the heart of it, it is the importance of the arts as a way to find wholeness in exploring one's own cultural identity. And then she says, I always say that finding the publisher is like finding the right partner. I think we might have taken 24 hours to say, please, can we be the right partner? And she said that she was sending it to multiple, making multiple submissions. And we are so grateful that Celeste chose to publish with HARP, and it's been a wonderful journey. And one of the things that just finding out how much Celeste and I had in common. We're both educators. We both do research on the body and food, and I've been quoting Celeste in my research since 1999. So I couldn't have been more excited when Celeste reached to us, and then we worked together for almost a year. So that's all that I will say. It's wonderful.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Dorothy and John.
Thank you, Dorothy and John. Oh, thank you, Sean. You're helping me. I see removing. Hold on. Sean, would you mind helping me with, or is, oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, sorry. I'd also like to invite the Armenian Cultural Association, maybe Greg, to say a couple of words about the Armenian Cultural Association, seeing that you have sponsored this event, and just quick couple of words, just as an acknowledgement to you. I'm putting you in the spotlight, but just to say that, and also what you felt with, you met Celeste and you were very enthused by her interview recently, another interview that you heard, and you wanted to sponsor this event.
Well, yes, you did put me on the spot, Tamara. I was not prepared to say anything today, but it's a pleasure. It's really a privilege to have Celeste and enjoy this hour and a half with such a talented person. Since the first day that I met Celeste, I've acknowledged what a wonderful person she is inside out. So I think we all know her. I don't need to say more. And I want to thank you also that you accepted right away when the Armenian Cultural Association suggested that you do the hosting for today. And I don't want to say more. I just want to hear Celeste, like all of us do. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I had to acknowledge you, and you know. And also we're going to be talking with Marsha Nurisa Odabashian, who is the Boston-based artist who has adorned the Celeste book with her wonderful artwork. And Marsha's drawings and paintings uniquely reflect the tension and expansiveness of being raised in dual cultures. I'll put you on the spotlight, Marsha, so people can see you. In dual cultures, Armenian and American. As a young child, she watched her mother cultivate the Armenian tradition of dyeing eggs red by boiling them in onion skins. In her work, vignettes of current events, history, and social justice emerge from the onion skin dye on paper, stretch canvas, or compressed cellulose sponge. So thank you, Marsha. We will talk later in between the interview. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So Celeste, let's start. A little background. I just would like to ask you about a memorable part of growing up that comes to mind.
Thank you, Tamar, and I also want to take this opportunity to thank John and Dorothy for their vision and passion for publishing this work in Arts and Health, and as well as thanking the Armenian Cultural Association for sponsoring this. And thank you, Tamar, so much for coming and dialoguing. A memorable moment. Well, I think there's so many memorable moments. It's like in multiples, but I think what infuses everything is, you know, put it this way, it's really, really hot here. And so what did I do yesterday at 5 in the morning? I made baba ganoush and hummus so we could eat that all weekend since I'm not going to cook. And so, you know, who else does that? You know, that's like chopping up parsley at 5 in the morning, you know, an eggplant. So that's what infuses the memorable moment, I think, of my life is my mother constantly cooking and giving me lectures about the food of, like, you know, Celeste, you must put some red pepper with some, you know, with the purple of the deep black eggplant. They must be complementary colors. You can't just cook, you can't just eat it. It has to be complementary colors. So there's something, this thing of food and love, the combination of food equals love is, to me, I think, what infuses the memories of my life, and I think it has fused my own. And of course, I like to cook, but I made enough meals. I like to eat too. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's only one of them. You know, one. I think the whole book is about the memories.
Yeah. It's a wonderful book. And also you're going to be reading some poetry for us throughout the our event. So this is your 7th book and also your 3rd book of poetry. I know this book has been the most personal one for you and the hardest one for you to kind of get through emotionally. How long did it take you to conceive? So how did you start with the idea, or when did you start with this?
It's a really good question. And I think with, you know, I see writing as a way of living and being. So it wasn't just I started, here's a beginning date and an end. I think I've been really voraciously excavating my Armenian identity for the last 15 years. And out of that have become poems, but particularly in the last year, because I was on a study leave, I really had the time to dedicate to do a lot more research, as well as write poetry, as well as edit and hone the work. So it's not just a clear-cut you know, I think sometimes we write way before we even are writing, because writing is the very last part. It's the living, it's being present to all of the journey of all of the details of what that journey entails. But in some ways it was a latent, it's a latent project in some ways. And it is the most vulnerable, because anytime you're talking about your mother, it's vulnerable. And anytime you're talking about your identity and trauma and beauty, it becomes very vulnerable.
And regarding your Armenian identity, when was the pivotal? Do you kind of remember a time? You know, you've been saying you've been 15 years, you've been honing.
Yeah.
And, you know, was there a pivotal event that led you to that?
Well, one of the pivotal events was, I often call myself a recovering choreographer, and I think it was maybe it was about 17 years ago. I was improvising a piece, a performance piece, and in it I started talking about what happened in April, of them taking the poets and the intellectuals out first and killing them. And I didn't even know where this came from. And I just was very passionate about this because I dance and speak at the same time. And I just knew I had to look into it. And at the same time, I was going through a lot of therapy, and I was going through a lot of big changes in my life and a lot of loss. And I realized that from all of that work that I really needed to look into my roots. There's something in my roots that formed me more than I understood. And there's a poem in the book that talks about that, actually, that I was 20 years in therapy, and time would be better spent looking for my roots, because in there was treasures and treasures and beauty, and difficulty, but beauty. Yes.
And it's the longing, right? I mean, you know,
it's the longing, you know, I've been longing all my life. I'm always longing, you know, and when I realized that longing, the word longing is in the word belonging. I've always wanted a place to belong, and I've come to peace with the fact that I really belong nowhere, except for those I love. I mean, I don't fit in all the places. I'm often a bad girl. I don't fit in the academy. I'm not completely Armenian. I'm half Armenian. You know, my mother always is reminding my father all the time, your problem is you're Irish, you know, as if the Irish never suffered either. But, you know, it's like, so it's like I'm a half breed, you know. I've totally lost your train of thought on what you actually asked me now. This is, well, this is why it's a dialogue, because you're going to remind me what you just said.
Well, we were talking about what led you to this journey.
Yes. Yeah. And the longing, it is the longing. But then when I went to Armenia, because I was studying Armenian dance and listening to the music and dancing to the music, it's like a longing is in the culture. It's in the bones and the marrow in the cells. And I thought, I understand this. I get this in my DNA. Yeah.
And so maybe you can read us. This could lead to reading us The Marrow of Longing.
Okay.
Which is the title of the book.
The title of, yes. The Marrow of Longing. Longing resides in my marrow, a land inside my chest. Asks to be familiar, a place I know belongs to my longing. She spoke of this land over and over, tales of leaving as a baby, as if time had passed and she was 10, 20. Yearning for a land was bred in my mother. Her parents ached for the Armenia they left. Even the beauty of Cambridge could not equal what was in their cells. That was the bread my mother was fed. The body knows roots. Soles of feet are souls, knowing earth. I am a child raised between land and sea. Borders between is where I find home. An ache reaches the earth in my body in the earth. Longing is the land that I dwell.
Beautiful. And I like the, you know, longing is in belong, long. No, right? Was it that? It was.
Yes, well, longing is in belonging, and I think it's okay to be in longing.
So going back to, you mentioned your trip to Yerevan, to Armenia. I know you traveled there few years ago, I remember. And there is a poem in there where you went to Yerek-Nadzor. And so I know, you know, with a lot of people, you know, they kind of long to, you know, go to Armenia. It's this dream. And for a lot of people, it's an amazing experience. For many, it's not. It's, you know, they expect something, they don't get what they expect. How was it for you? What did you feel when you were there, and what did you take away from there?
I think it was really mixed, because I went in 2007, and that's a particular political time that I didn't understand what that meant, and there was a and so I didn't understand those kind of geopolitics and political implications. But there was a sense of, I really, when you take the Yerek-Nadzor, that's where I really felt most at home. There was a deep sense of home, and I felt deeply at home in the dance and the music, in a sense of I knew this all along.
And you went, and you were, so did you go with a dance troupe?
Well, this is the funny thing. I went thinking, you know, I'm going to go with this troupe, with this tour. There'll be like all these Armenians on this tour. So this will be great. You know, there'll be dancers and musicians. There'll be all Armenians. There was 40 people. I was the only Armenian. Apparently, everyone in Holland and Germany wants to come to Armenia to study Armenian folk dance. I felt like such a fish out of water. I thought, oh my gosh. And here I'm weeping at the memorial. I'm always weeping and emotionally reacting to everything that's going on. And they did not get this, but they loved Armenian culture, you know, and they could do the Armenian dancing way more than I could, because I had a bad knee, and their leader had gone to Armenia many, many times and worked, Tanika Van Giel, and had worked in Armenia. So it was great to go, but I really wanted to go back in a different way as well. So it was a little bit of an odd experience. It's like being on a tourist bus with people that go, you know. But it did lead me. In fact, I'm pretty sure Antoine that I met, who was actually on this call, I think it was him who told me of your husband's father-in-law, and he said, I know this Armenian in Vancouver, and then that's how I got to meet you, Tamar. So, you know, it's just, you have to go to Armenia to figure out who in Vancouver is Armenian, because
that's right. That's
yes.
The connections that you make in Armenia.
Yeah.
And so earlier, you know, I read your bio, and, you know, clearly what a multi-talented woman. So how would you, so if someone were to get to know you better, wanted to know you better, and they wanted to know what you do, or who you are, how would you define yourself?
You know, I often define myself as I'm just trying to get through my day. You know, you know, you can read a bio and you can sound so spectacular, but really I still can't find my keys sometimes. And, you know, I'm just, you know, we all have our inner neurotic, but I don't like to be categorized. And I think that's and I'm not good at categorizing things. I've never been, so I think that's what I've actually put that into a career. So I would let my poet and my dancer and my mother, my scholar, everything come together. And I don't want to separate my lived experience from my scholarship. I don't want to set my poetry from my everyday. So everything is infused. And so if you spend time each day, a little time, even if it's a half an hour, ruminating and walking and listening and writing out of that, or creating, then everything becomes, the ordinary and sacred break down, and everything becomes everything is a place for material to create. You know, so when I was raising my 3 sons, and mostly alone, I didn't have the same amount of time. I didn't have a lot of extra family around, but if you just attend to the moment, it's amazing what magic can come up. So
that's right. Yeah, that's great. Not feedback, but advice. So the relationship with your mother I want to talk about, because the book is very much, you know, I mean, I read many of the poems, I've read most of them, and you know, I cry easily anyway, so, you know, that's not very difficult for me to cry, but it was very moving. Very moving. And I love the relationship that came through the poems that you had with your mother, and your parents as well, and you know, both of them. So how would you kind of describe your relationship with your parents, and also your mother's identity or relationship with her identity as an Armenian, and also having married an Irish person, and they were very much in love, you know, and I remember you saying that they gave you love to last a lifetime.
Yes,
so
they did. You know, I think my relationship with my mother was exceptionally beautiful and exceptionally difficult all at the same time, because you know, she was the only one of her siblings that actually was born in historic Armenia, in Karput, and she left, and she was also an artist. And so I think they never had the chance to actually reconcile what happened, and they didn't even know the stories. So there was so much trauma, but they didn't understand that. So my mother was spectacular and an artist and loving, and I'm like milquetoast compared to my mother. She was lively and danced. I thought all mothers in the 60s just danced after supper, you know, and painted and made flower arrangements. And then she would scream and yell and be in torment. And I didn't understand that. And only now, you know, years later, I understand what could not be reconciled, how trauma is in the DNA, how we have intergenerational trauma, which is actually, I think, what really, you know, it was really part of the impetus because writing is a place of inquiry. But, you know, my parents both died when I was 30. And 8 months from each other. And so, yes, their love, they gave me so much love. It did last for a lifetime. And I have, and I can feel their presence and absence many years later, of course, you know, after you grieve. But I can often hear their voice. And of course, my father was a New Yorker. He was kind of like, if you ever saw Seinfeld, he was like Kramer on speed. And, you know, and so it was like quite a lively home, you know. You know, my mother, it was definitely a very lively home.
So we know where you get your liveliness from.
And I'm thankful for the sense of humor, because I'm telling you, if I didn't have that sense of humor, I would. And yet humor is connected to humus, which in human, right? So it's all, and you know, interestingly enough, I'm sorry, that's why you're going to have to get me to stop talking and read poetry. But when I was in Armenia and I fell in love with the Hutchkars, everything is in stone that has meaning. And in Ireland, the Celtic, the stones. So it's fascinating.
The connection of us across, you know, cultures. So this brings us one of my favorite poems, Swept in Her Love. Can you read that for us, please?
You know, it's funny, that's actually several people's favorite poems. And, you know, it almost didn't even get into the book. So that's really interesting. I almost decided to not put that in the book.
That's usually the case.
Probably because my relationship to sweeping. So I'll read it to you. Swept in her love. Sweep the kitchen floor one more time, she said. It was a chore I wanted to finish fast, her Boston accent resounding. Do it again, sweep the floor with love. I can't even do the Boston accent anymore. Do it again, sweep the floor with love. When I finally visit Yerevan, every dawn the streets are graced with feet and arms sweeping sidewalks and storefronts, sounds that wake daylight. Mama's voice echoes here on these streets. Once again, swept in her love. So, you know, I think my mother, she was more monastic than she realized. You know, I just really thought that she wanted me to sweep the floor a lot. But really, I think what she was doing was saying, whatever we do in our ordinary world, we can do with love. We can cook, we can sweep, we can swim, and we can act, we can enliven our world with love. And I think that's really the message that has come through to me.
I'm just going to read as we're Lola. Hi, Lola Kundakchian. I did a workshop with Lola, I think maybe 8 months ago now, or maybe more. Anyway, lucky to have known Celeste's work since 2007 through Ararat Literary Quarterly. And then I love this, sweep the floor with love, Lola says. And we've got Susan. swept in your poem, Celeste. Shayna, am I pronouncing your name right? Shayna, enliven our world with love. Beautiful. Thank you for the comments. I just wanted to read them because they can get lost. And I want to acknowledge all your feedback. So going from that to your 3 boys, Celeste, you've got 3 boys.
Well, then they became man boys and now they're men.
And you have a poem, Passion and Perseverance, which are dedicated to Lucas, Caleb, and Micah. And they are amazing, beautiful boys. I have met them, I know them. And how do you see, I'm just curious because you do mention sometimes, you know, the Armenianness in them. And so how do you see that, like in what little traits? And I'm sure they're not on this call, so
They're not on this call, so I can embarrass them. Yeah, I sometimes, sometimes say, you know, you just have just enough Armenian in you to really be absolutely so handsome, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there, you know, I don't think I understood how Armenian I was until much later in my life. I kind of rejected some of the not the Armenian culture, but the culture that felt like where I grew up was connected to status and a lot of pressure. And but as I see the passion of my children, I also, and I see their liveliness, I do see their Armenianness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to read you that poem tomorrow?
Yes, I do.
Passion and Perseverance for my sons Lucas, Caleb, and Micah. You are more Armenian than you know. Beloved 3 sons, never met my mother or had the food she cooked. I've never made it as she did. The bud egg still doesn't come out just like hers. You all loved it nonetheless. Who can deny melted cheese? You eat passion like bud egg, yearning imbues your hearts. What grandmothers and grandfathers would never see. Continue to sing beyond time.
So beautiful. Thank you, Celeste. And you mentioned about the pressure or the status, that you know, with the Armenian status you grew up in, and then so how do you feel amongst, like, how can I explain it? You know, sometimes, you know, we feel not enough, not Armenian enough, not, you know, this happens in many cultures.
Yes.
It's not just the Armenian culture.
Yes.
And we're always measured by, you know, how much we do, or if we speak the language, how well we speak the language.
Right.
So what is your, you know, experience with this? What is your, you know, your take on this?
Yeah, you know, and that's a great question, Tamar. And, you know, I feel differently about it now than I did growing up. I think I reacted to it growing up because I also grew up in New England and it felt like there was a lot of pressure. And I think that you know, they didn't have some of the chances that we did. So there was a lot of pressure to recreate an Armenian culture, not just an Armenian culture, but a culture that had a lot of agency in the world. And as any good girl does, I rejected it. So I remember making sure in high school that I got bad grades just so they wouldn't make me go to an Ivy League school. You know, I still ended up being a professor, you know. You know, so I think it's a different thing that there's a sense of wanting. There's these letters that I found of my mother's to my father in World War II, love letters. And she's talking about being in her kitchen. And so there would be her mother, of course, and her sister Mary and herself. And in the kitchen with her is Alan Hovhaness, was a very well-known Armenian composer, and Hyman Bloom and Ravi Shankar. And, you know, it's just kind of like, here's this intellectual, artistic, philosophical, they're having conversations in my mother's kitchen, but the women did not go on. I mean, my mother was still talented, but the women in that generation, and she was born in 1912. They didn't have the you know, the possibilities that the men did or that I do, and so there was a different pressure that was put on the kids, I think. You know.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious. I'm very fascinated by the absences in the narratives and who didn't, you know, what isn't there as much as what is there.
Could you read the poem Imposter? So this is what's
Imposter, yes.
to that.
Yes, and so yes, I'm an
Imposter
imposter. I
syndrome.
should just know what page it's on, but obviously I'm an imposter because I just don't even know what page it's on.
I can tell you what page it's on.
Oh, I don't know if I should read this because I could get in trouble because of this poem. So you're asking me to read it.
70, page 70.
Well, I might get in trouble, but you're asking me to. Okay, so imposter. A stranger at the Armenian bakery stops me when he notices how much lahmacun I buy. He asks, "Are you Armenian?" I say, "Yes, my mother was born there." He asks, "Do you speak the language?" I yelled, "No, then you're not Armenian." I didn't go to Armenian school. I don't have the language. I'm only 1/2 Armenian. Sometimes I feel like an imposter. My Armenian mother made sure that 1/2 is 100%. Every day she pointed to Mount Ararat. I don't go to the Armenian church. I'm a Christian feminist. I'm seminary trained and love God. How could I be part of male leadership, endorse what I know not to be true? But even Jesus appeared to a woman first and proclaimed the urgency. Go tell them I have risen. Another language breathes through lungs, vibrates in vocal folds, the linguistics of blood and bone, a grammar deeper than the ear can hear.
I love the Christian feminist. Thank you. So I just want to invite Marsha on to kind of speak about, you know, your relationship with Marsha, how you know Marsha, and you know, and the art. It's absolutely beautiful in this book.
Oh yeah, it's just amazing.
Before I do that, maybe I'll read. Yes, and then also it was in the invite. I'll just read. I've got 6 comments here in the chat. I'll just read those so I don't forget them. Lola says, "Who can deny melted cheese?" She's laughing at that sentence. Barb Nixon continued to sing beyond time, literally and figuratively. Antoine, hi Antoine. Thank you for this beautiful session. I am sitting in my car outside the restaurant, stealing their Wi-Fi band. I have to leave now. Best wishes to all. And then Greg Coco, hi Coco. I was very touched by your sweep the floor with love, as I too felt so fortunate to be swept with love by my mom, who I lost 6 years ago. Thank you so much. Oh, this is Astra. Astra's writing. Yeah, Astra, your lovely mom. Well done, Lola says, well done. And Susan McCaslin, deeper than the ear can hear is so right. Thank you all for your comments. So now we invite, hi Susan. We invite Marsha to, talk about your relationship with Celeste and your wonderful artwork.
Okay. First, I would like to thank Tamar for hosting this and the Armenian Cultural Association for sponsoring and Heart Publishing for giving us the opportunity to have the poems and artwork published. And of course, I'd like to thank Celeste, who I have thoroughly enjoyed working with. This is maybe our 4th project together, I believe.
Yes.
We have many more that we're planning to do in the future. It's just very exciting. And I met Celeste maybe about a year ago. It seems like it's been longer than that.
We just realized the other day that we must have been at our Uncle Carney's wedding at the same time.
Right,
Must have not have. We don't remember either, but that would have been in
like 1970.
Yeah.
Or something like that. but yeah, we're like we're distantly related through marriage. Yeah. And one thing that we have in common is that we both had very creative, ultra creative Armenian mothers who loved to cook and loved food. So, and we also have longing in common. And so we were immediately drawn towards each other. And the work, the poetry and the artwork just seemed to latch on to each other.
Mhm.
And one of the things I'm going to say, just, you know, in terms of my artwork, is that all of it is done on using onion skin dye. And I dyed either paper or canvas. And oh, right, okay. Right. That one is called Love in the Ruins, and I can show you a couple of others. I don't know if you can see my, this is the Villagers. I don't know if you can see it very well. Is that clear?
A little bit, not so great.
Not,
I think
okay.
everyone has to buy the book.
You have to buy the book.
You have to buy the
Oh,
book.
You do have to buy the book. And I'm trying to think what else to say. Do you have any
I'd
questions?
just like to say too that, you know, it isn't that Marcia's illustrating the poems. We, in some ways, we are working as companion artists, and then we come together and we see that it's almost like we're on a companion journey. And then we see that we're doing similar things, and then the poetry and the paintings, they companion one another. So that's a very different process, and it's a lovely collaborative piece.
And at the beginning, we weren't quite sure, well, how do we do this? And so, you know, Celeste started looking at some of the artwork, and we started matching some of it up. And then I did a couple of art pieces based on specific poems. And Celeste did a couple of poems based specifically on some of the artwork. So it worked in 3 different ways.
And it keeps growing, so.
It keeps growing. We keep coming up with new ideas.
We just need some grants to do the work.
We need some grants.
And I think Sean put the link to the book if anyone wishes. Thank you, Sean. Wishes to buy it from Harp Publishing. Thanks, Sean, for doing that. It's in the chat box. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Marcia.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
So I think this brings us, Celeste, we can open the floor to any comments, questions anyone may have. I just want to kind of...
Can I just read a couple of poems tomorrow?
Oh, of course, yes.
Just before there's
I'd love that.
I just want to read maybe a couple of short ones. How does that sound?
Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. Batshik and Geragor. I remember 2 words, Batshik to kiss, Geragor food or meal. My mother reminds me of these partners in the everyday. Kissing the food, food as kiss. She left me with what was necessary. The alphabet of longing. There are not enough letters in the alphabet to define longing. The Armenian soul is varied and complex as the cuisine of food. Aromas of sound, the taste of words, inexpressible haunts, and the steps of migration. And I'm going to read one more, and then you can go open it up. I can never read. So many I want to read to you. Okay, migrations. Just listen how desire asks to come through. When the world is still arriving, dawn breaks through into morning. Get out of the way. Say yes to a universe waiting to take shape.
Mhm. So beautiful. Your poems are a mixture of vulnerability, strength, and like coming out of something, like blooming. There's always something blooming out of them.
Mhm. Thank you, Tamar. Now, did you want to
Erica-
open it up? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. Erica says, Erica Grimm, say yes to universal waiting to take shape. She loved that. She says yes. Sally August, emerging. So yeah, I'd like to open it up to anyone who has questions, comments for Celeste. I'd love for you to come on to say hi. Or if you don't want to speak, then maybe you can put something in the chat, your question or your comment.
I have a question. How do you combine your love of dance with poetry? I know I've known you first as a poet.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey into this
Mm.
book and how you converge the two, please.
Oh, thank you, Lola. Yeah, well, I see writing very much connected to dance and language coming out of the body, out of the breath. And so a lot of the work that I do is improvisational movement and dance that allows for voice to come in that. And so sometimes these poems originated from a dance where I was speaking and dancing at the same time. And then I go and I write after I dance. And then sometimes I then dance the poetry. So it's a process of companionship constantly. And so and this is what I teach in my graduate classes, that writing from the body, that our body is like a wealth of, it's like a free GPS of creativity, like bursting of creativity. And we can access that language that comes from the breath and the pause and the rhythm. The body has an incredible poetic force. And so therefore the poetry can come out of the body. And so to me, like, I want to create a whole one-woman show connected to this book. And some of these have already been danced, but I want to, I really want to perform the whole entire book. But then I would integrate more comedy as well. But that's a little bit of an answer to it, Lola. And so I don't see them separate. I don't think I could write unless I moved, and I will keep dancing even till I'm 90s, because there's something about loosening the joints, loosening the fluid, the fluid inside your body loosens the creative process. Instead of writing from the head, sometimes I think we have to learn to unwrite to write, and then we can bring the editor back in and hone it instead of having it in the driver's seat. I saw Diane say something about the comedy.
I'm going to read a couple of, so Haig is my husband. I love this process you described with the artwork and poetry informing each other. Reminds me of Philip Glass and Gottfried Reggio's fluid workflow in creating Pawakatsi cuts.
Oh yeah, it's just like Philip Glass for sure.
Sally, is it Ogis or Ogis? I think it's Ogis. That was a great question, Lola. Yeah, it was. That's why I open it up, because you ask better questions than I do. The audience does. So that's great. It helps me. Say more about the comedy Diane's asking. I would love to hear about the comedy.
Well, I feel like sometimes in my life there's an absurdity to it. And I'm not sure if you've ever felt like that way in your own life. I mean, like, I think this is my father's sense of humor. I just can't stop. I went in the other day to get socks because I have an issue with my toe. And I noticed the socks were all social distance from themselves on the wall. Like, I just feel like there's a humor piece, and I constantly, like there's an absurdity to so much of life, and yet in the absurdity there is actually incredible wisdom. And I think when we're dealing with really difficult issues, genocide, trauma, and not that is not funny, but we have to also have humor in our lives, because our lives are just filled with absurdity, you know, as we speak. And so there's something to me that humor is like the leaven, it's like the yeast in the bread that lets it rise. And so it's kind of like my way for sanity. It allows, as someone just said, it allows for joy. It allows for both. And I love the word that humor and human and humus, they're all connected, right? They're all connected.
And Shayna, thank you, Celeste. Shayna's asking, did the book come together as one flow or as pieces over time?
It came as pieces for sure, but then it came as pieces, like all these little children. And then they decided, okay, I want to be in a family. I want you to put me in a book. I need to be, a book has a certain kind of form. So so it's like, it just announcing like, this is it. I want to be in a book. And so then you take the pieces and then you go and you take, I did a lot of research connected to Armenia. And so some pieces work in, and then there's all these other new poems that come together. So it's both. It is both in this particular book. But this book seems like it wants to do other things, like it wants to get on the road and do a performance. So I think it's going to have a lot of lives. And Marsha's work in connection to the book is another life. And I'd love to like do some, you know, so everything has many lives. I just live in multiples. I have twins. I can't help it. This is, yeah.
I can't wait for you to have it as a one-woman show, because your previous, the pepper one, what was it called?
It was called A Woman Giving Birth to a Red Pepper. And it had in it a piece called about the eggplant,
Yeah.
you know, really juicy about, you know, the eggplant and the pepper, you know, and sensuality of the pepper. And that was far more sensuous than dating online. I was single at the time. Thank goodness I have Sean now. I don't have to do any more pepper dances, but we just eat them all the time. So.
Barb Nixon mentions that Glass collaborated with Merce Cunningham as well. Lauren Aldred, what a joy to have discovered your books, your dance and you in 2007. I love following the dance of your inspiration and your life. Lauren from the North. Barbara Bickle, your clarion call for all to be in full beingness flows so beautifully through your art, you and all you touch. I loved hearing that Dorothy had been citing your creative scholarship since the 1990s. May your impact continue to flow inwards and outward, body to body to body. So grateful for how you have inspired my life. Can you speak to your love for language and how that has come to flow so fluidly from your body? You just answered. Maybe
I think
maybe
it's really the language. I think that I answered that. Yeah.
Yeah, to moving in a body. Maybe speak to moving in a body that is constantly changing.
Oh, I see Blanca says something about reflecting
on my own project that also focuses on identity, belonging, culture, and trauma. I didn't really engage with the intricacies of this at all until my 50s. In fact, I shut a lot of that out earlier. You also seem to have really developed this as you matured. I wonder if you could reflect on why this takes so long.
Oh, you know, we're such complicated and messy people and complex, wondrous people. And I think I just wasn't ready. I think I realized that I was, you know, I joke and I say I was 20 years in therapy and I realized I was Armenian. And that was because I remember I was constantly choosing things in my life that had great capacity to withhold, and particularly partners. And I needed to look at my own intergenerational trauma to break the patterns of my own life of that I could not break before. And once so it was something about my age. I think there's just different seasons of age. We're ready for different things. I don't think we can plan this. I don't understand how these people, they can plan everything, how this is when I'll get married. This is when I have a kid. This is when I get divorced. This is when life just happens. Life is a little messy. And I think there's, we have seasons, and we must have compassion towards our own seasons, and we can't orchestrate them all the time. And so there is something in, I think, our different parts of our years that things come to us, and we respond, or we're free to respond. And
Also,
which I see that connects to Susan's question about messiness.
Mhm.
Did you say some words about dancing out of messiness? Yeah, so. Yeah, you know, I think I really see our limitations as a place of freedom. I see the limitations, you know, when I couldn't dance on, I had knee issues and surgeries, and, you know, I danced on chairs. And so the limit can become a place of possibility. So instead of trying to get over our messiness, you know, maybe we can move through it. You know, maybe the messiness actually has some brilliance to it. Maybe the messy, this sounds so radical, maybe the messiness sparks joy, not the.
But also Celeste, can you talk about, I feel like as a woman as well, like we, you know, the seasons that we go through in life, you know, and then also we don't recognize from kind of decade to decade, we really don't recognize ourselves as women. You know, we change so much, especially with our different kind of things that we have as women. So like, can you talk to that as well? Like, you know, how that relates also to the trauma aspect, how you can't plan this, but also, you know,
well, that might take a couple days, and you know, and now talking anything to do with gender is so loaded. But I think many it's just complicated being a human being, and I think whether you're a woman or a man, and we don't always all fit into the specified gender roles. But I will say this, you know, as being kind of like your high-powered professional woman, I also have that part of me that, like, I have to make sure everyone's fed all the time. And that's very Armenian. I'm trying to feed people that don't even want to be fed. You know, my kids are gone, and I'm like, can I make you something else to eat? I mean, and so that's just like part, you know, when my kids were growing up, the entire neighborhood was at our house, and they lived in much more sophisticated houses. Like, why are you all in this little house? Because we had candles every night for dinner, and we had a lot of food and conversation. And yet at the same time, have this very demanding job. So it's like, how do you have all these roles? You know, it's messy, not to mention hormones.
Sandeep was asking about how you reclaimed your middle name, Nazeli.
Yeah, you know, I love that name, Nazeli, now. And my mother never really, she didn't put it on my birth certificate, but she always called me that. And I didn't like it because it was different. And I felt different as a kid. I know it's interesting. And this even goes into the whole thing about whiteness. You know, I mean, I felt really different in my little town. Like, I knew that I had a bigger nose. I was weird. I was, you know, and it's kind of like the Armenian showed up. And so I wanted to be, I already had a weird name, Celeste. Like, do I want that name too? You know, but then as I got older, I loved that name. And then I realized it's in my ancestry that my great grandmother that I never met, his middle name would have been Nazeli. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm reclaiming back my ancestry. Like, you know, I feel like there's ancestors that are rooting for us. The ancestors helped me write this book, the ancestors that died in the genocide that are here, that there weren't, you know, there's so much more. So yeah, that's part of my reclaiming it. And yeah.
You're making me wish I had a middle name too.
But I don't have an Armenian name, right? And, you know, so there you go. So then you.
So Lola loves movies.
There is a poem connected to that question. Can I read it to you?
Of course.
It's called Ancestral Tones. We are not only ones who died in the genocide, victims of horror. We are beauty incarnate, weavers, shoemakers, mothers and daughters, duduk players, poets, fathers, sons, priests, goat herders, scholars, silversmiths, brothers and sisters, bakers and artisans. And most of all, we are land. Baked from the terroir of arid and fertile soil, figs, pomegranates, nettles, and olives. Do not forget who we were, how we loved, a poetic memoir of Armenians. We are notes on a tetrachord, calling forth polyphonic in our bones. We are ancestral tones. So I heard so much of the awful, the horror. I needed to embrace the beauty of my culture. And and this is my heritage, and I'm living in that now. So even though there's so much difficulty and we still had a war and art, there's just so much still difficulty. There is also so much beauty, and I need it. I need it to have courage.
Mm-hmm.
Celeste, can I ask you to read some of your older work that's from other books, like the eggplant?
Oh,
book
beneath.
from
Oh, yes,
Adalakli?
sure.
Maybe
Yes.
even I wanted Celeste to actually, do a little performance, but it's very difficult on
Yeah,
the.
I'm not in the space because
Yeah.
we had to,
Mm-hmm,
but I'm happy to do it in the future.
mm-hmm.
But everything's kind of a performance, but yes. So this is an older poem. In fact, I think it was first published in Ararat, and then Lola Kudakian, who is on here, who runs the Armenian Poetry Project, has been just so amazing, bringing so much poetry to the world, and it was in there as well. So I want to just thank you, Lola. Beneath the skin of plum black, aromas took second place to hues of dark purple. It was your colors my mother was in love with. Eggplant, jeweled and sauteed, onions adorned with red, pepper, a hint of green parsley, a slice of lamb. Plum black, you are love marinated in drips of oil, tenderized in the hearth in a New England kitchen. Star leaves at a slender head, pear-like in shape, endless dishes, meals of every day formed from you, smooth to fingers touch, a sacred vegetable in its nakedness. I've disguised you for my children's palate, mussed you with olive oil, yogurt, and plenty of garlic, transformed you into baba ganoush, still a far cry from the 101 ways my mother would lovingly open up to your pungent parts. Never leave the pan without a hint of green, she said. Look how stunning the red pepper accents black and violet in the pan. Smells, textures, hues are the heavens of the new earth and the scent of the old land. Second generation creativity, close to the bone. Color is in the heart of my home, hidden in the eggplant and hidden in a life. My mother had an eggplant soul of beauty, of both dark and light, rough and tender, yellow, white flesh encased in mauves, the meeting of art and life, just beneath the skin of plum black.
Stunning. So I've been told, Celeste, thank you for that. And that's the one that you did in the One Woman Show, is that right?
Yeah, a version
Yeah,
of it. Yeah,
a
a version of that went into the One Woman Show, yeah.
So we've had a couple of people, sorry, I did not see you having your hands up raised, Erica and Michael. Erica, would you like to start?
No, Michael can go first because he's had his hand up for a long time.
Oh, that's okay, Erica. Do you want to go?
Oh,
This might be fresher.
Oh, okay. Before I forget, right?
No.
And Celeste, some of the earliest work of yours that I recall, you were acknowledging that there's a dearth of spaces for lament in society and in many different gathered communities. And so I remember just being floored with that insight and how true it was. Like, our society does not make space for lament. And right now, our collective commons is filled with grief, given what's, been unearthed in terms of First Nations history here on Turtle Island. And I just love you to speak more about making space for the fullness of life. Like that's what your life is about. But how do we make space for the difficult, the grief, the lament, the trauma, and how does and if we don't make space for that, what don't we get to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erica. Yes, thank you. I still have a letter that is by my end table. My mother wrote to me probably a year before she died. And it says, Celeste, the depth of your joy will be the depth of your sadness will be the depth of your joy. And when my parents, left very early on and 8 months from each other, it catapulted me in a kind of grief that I'm an only child. That was my whole family. That was it. And I was living at the time in Saskatchewan. I was away from where I grew up. And I danced every day, that grief, and I danced, and then I just wept on the floor. And I think I did that for several years. And I realized that in that dancing and moving my grief was that the grief was an endangered species in the culture that we've been living in, and I think in North America. We talk about someone died, and then they ask you a week later, did you get over it? Or no one talks about it at all. In fact, we want to talk about it. We want to talk about who that person was. And so I really believe if we don't enter our own grief, there's such horror happening in the world right now, particularly we're finding, for those of you who are graves, unmarked graves of Indigenous children. But if we don't enter our own, if we can't access our own grief, we'll not have the compassion that we have for someone else. And we also will be stopped. Well, basically, I think we're just stopped up, and therefore we won't access the joy, and we won't access the creativity, and we won't access the birthright of what it means to be on this planet and really, truly have love flowing through us. But there's not permission. There's not permission in our culture. And so it's a radical act to grieve and to leave room for it. And so I just have never been one of those people that could kind of lock up my feelings. I used to wish I could. And now I'm literal, as there's toxins. When you cry, there's literal toxins that come out of your tears. I see tears are prayers. My favorite verse in the Bible is this: Jesus wept. Yeah, so I think accessing our grief, and I allow for that, and I allow to write from that, to dance from it, to open it for my students. It can transform. It's like alchemy. It's energy. As a dancer, you move the energy through your body. So it's it's an alchemy process. And so that's what that is. So.
Thank you, Celeste.
I don't like it in the process. It's not like I'm waiting for something awful to happen. I'm very good at complaining and ranting. So, I just say that's part of my culture.
That was a really great question, Erica. And Celeste, we've had several conversations around this in the past few years around grief. And I'm really grateful for you to have this, as a person who understands grief.
And there isn't any answers to grief. Even as we companion one another in our life, there's nothing, sometimes no words, there's no words.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to be witnessed, or, to be witnessed,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Michael, would you like to?
Thank you, Tamar. And actually, Tamar, I want to thank you for hosting. This is really, really lovely how you're bringing us all together here to celebrate Celeste.
She's doing a beautiful job.
Absolutely. No, it's really, really lovely. I'll thank Marcia first for the beautiful paintings that accompany Celeste's beautiful words. And then finally, Celeste, thank you for bringing us together here to be able to celebrate you through this amazing book. And I've said this to you privately, but I want to say it publicly. We have been friends for, 2 decades now, over 2 decades. And I've read your poetry for years and I've always loved it, and as well as your performances. But I really feel you have pushed through something to another world. It's like you've gone so deeply that it's actually brought you even more fully into the world, and you bring us with you, which is just such a gift. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh no, yeah, thank you. So I actually have a question, and it's partly in the title of the book. And I'm glad Erica asked her question first, because I think in many ways this may companion with it. So the Marrow of Longing, I keep rolling that over in my mouth and my mind all these months when I read drafts of the book. And here's my question. I think in some ways, or I wonder in some ways, I think in mainstream society, there's a sense that longing is something to be gotten over, right? We achieve something and it's done, right? It's just like, it's almost a kind of consumerist mentality that it's okay to long, but that you have to achieve it somehow. And what I feel like I'm hearing in both the poems and your own living and what you share with us is this idea that maybe the longing is actually a kind of call to attention.
Yes.
Is that a fair thing to say?
I wouldn't say that, but I love that you say that. I think it's a call to attention, and it's also not something to get over. It's a way of being in the world, and it can be a gift.
Yeah, and as you just said, in response to Erica's questions, it's receiving and being open to the grief as well as the joys.
Yes.
And that's why I think this idea of the marrow of it has had me really, I find that so compelling, because it is deeply in our bones, the things that.
It's so interesting. You know, I grew up, you know, we always made chicken broth. I always made chicken broth for my kids, which is now, of course, it's bone broth and it's marrow broth, and it's like it's in to eat marrow, you know, so but I think that I love that the longing calls you to attention. I think that's really lovely.
Well, I think you've said it in so many ways.
This is why it's always great to have dialogue, because I mean, I really believe our stories out of one another, our stories are found in one another. And so that we were all part of each other's stories, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Which reminds me of one quick poem, but now I have to figure out where it is. Oh, I know. Can I? It's okay. I can't seem to find it at the moment, so just keep going and I'll find it.
I love the.
What's the title? So that
I found it.
We'll do the work for you. Okay.
I found it. It's called The Story of One. The story of one. If we only have fragments, aren't all pieces a whole? What happens to one happens to all. So much has gone missing. Strands of DNA whisper a mystery. The story of one is the survival of a nation.
I love when you said, Celeste, you know, our stories. What was it you said? I can't really.
We are found one of the stories.
Exactly.
I see Debbie has a question.
Yes, yeah. Well, I really just wanted to make a comment. You know, even though the themes are also clear in the book, and it was very helpful at the beginning of this when you started talking about, you know, this family of poems. It was very helpful to hear you talk about, you know, like specifically, you know, not feeling like you belonged here, or like whether, you know, growing up or in the academy, you know, everybody's like this, but you're like that. So, you know, that kind of like, in a sense, groundlessness, you know, and trying to find your footing, right? So you do that so amazingly in this book. It's really moving, it's really touching, and, you know, as a response to, you know, just trying to reconcile these things, you know, trying to address, you know, this kind of groundlessness. It's really, really amazing. And I mean, there's a lot of poems that, you know, when I finished them, I go, you know, in other words, I really liked it. it really got me. But I have to say, this poem, the Imposter, I love this one very much because, you know, it starts off so differently, like it just in terms of the language, the progression of the poem, it just starts off so differently than the way it ends. And so because you have language, like, you know, everything is language for you, whether it's food or color or whatever. But I mean, I love this because, you know, part of me was like indignant when I read, you know, the guy saying, you know, are you Armenian? And he says, you know, if you don't speak the language, you're not, right? Then you're not Armenian. And then as you go through the conclusion, you know, the progression of the poem, the linguistics of blood and bone, a grammar deeper than the ear can hear. And so it's almost, it was a wonderful way to speak to, you know, this kind of statement, like you're so-called an imposter. But there are so many levels to this, and it's not just talk on the language. So it's really lovely. It's really, really lovely.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie. And Debbie is my, you know, is my first cousin. So we share this lineage of ancestry. So that means, it means so much. And just to say also, you know, when I first came home and that happened, I was on a big rant, but it took a while for the rant to finally get to that last line.
Well, yeah, because when I saw it, I thought, well, I mean, I felt really indignant. And then as I went through, I'm like, well, I don't think Celeste would have been indignant, so I shouldn't have that reaction. So thank you. This was really great.
Thank you. You know, it's so interesting. You know, when I grew up, you know, my mother didn't teach me Armenian, and I'm sure because my father wasn't Armenian. And now all kids know, you know, easily 2, 3, 4 languages. You know, so I have started taking Armenian, but I'm not getting that far yet. I might be too old, but I'll keep persevering.
Thank you, Celeste. I think, does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Just want to say hi, Celeste. And I put in the chat, it's Barbara Nixon.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. I just had wanted to thank you so much, first of all, but I just put in the chat, a yoga nidra teacher always says this at the end of class: may we be like the lotus at home in the muddy waters, because they grow in the mud.
Yes, true. We need the mud to grow.
I was just thinking of that, the messiness.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Barbara.
I'll also be sending all the comments to Celeste, because with the recording, it will give me all the comments that you've.
Yeah, you can save the chat.
Yeah, so I'll save it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's been a real pleasure, Celeste, to interview you, my longtime friend.
Yes, and thank you, Tamar. You're just such an elegant, you know, presence to talk to. It's just lovely. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. And I know for those of you on the West Coast, it is incredibly, incredibly hot in a ways that Canadians are not used to. So
can I say a quick thank you also, Tamar?
Yes.
I would on behalf of the Armenian Cultural Association, also not just on my behalf, as you know, the Armenian Cultural, its mission is to promote local talents, all Armenian talents, promote and preserve the culture. And I really feel that this 1.5 hour that we spent with you, Celeste, and with everybody who participated, everybody who said a few words, was really, really did that. You know, you talked about food around the dining room table. I think that is an Armenian tradition almost, and we've all experienced that. And somehow food for our minds, our souls, is a nourishment also, and to combine the food with that kind of nourishment is basically what we're used to.
Yes.
On a daily basis in our homes. But but this 1.5 hours was really nourishment for my soul, at least. I hope everybody felt that way. And I would like to thank each and everyone who participated today, and especially you and Tamar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for so much for
You're welcome.
hosting us. Means
Thank
a lot.
you, Coco. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank
Yes.
you. Lovely words. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and the goodbyes. I will save it for Celeste to see. And thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for partaking in the beauty that is life and the continuation of culture. I mean, because this is the beauty of life, you know, to kind of art and to do good through art and to kind of be in the muddy waters and find the beauty in the muddy waters. So thank you for being here. For me too, this was nourishment, but every minute I speak to Celeste is nourishment for my soul. So that's nothing new, but I really appreciate Celeste. I appreciate you so much. You're a dear friend, and I appreciate you all for being here, taking the time out. Thank you,
Thank you to
and have
everyone.
a wonderful summer. Have a wonderful evening, day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Wonderful. Bye.
Bye.